It was a humid Friday evening in the city, the kind where the air clings to your skin and the sun seems reluctant to set. The usual end-of-week bustle filled Eastwood streets. Cars honking, people laughing on stoops, and the distant wail of a siren far away. For Marcus Hayes, it was just another drive home after a long week at the federal courthouse. Jeans, a crisp polo, and a Yankees cap pulled low over his brow were his usual off-duty attire. His government-issued badge and service weapon were tucked away in the glove compartment, out of sight but never out of mind. Marcus had learned long ago that, for a black man in America, even a badge didn't always guarantee respect or safety. His thoughts wandered to the upcoming weekend, which might include a barbecue with his sister's family or a quiet evening with his girlfriend. He almost didn't notice the police cruiser that started following him a few blocks back, because he was so lost in thought. At first, he dismissed it. Cops patrolled this neighborhood all the time, especially since the new chief had promised to crack down on quality-of-life crimes. The cruiser, on the other hand, followed him as he turned left onto Maple Avenue. When he signaled right onto Jefferson, the blue and white did the same. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. He checked his speed, well within the limit. His taillights worked. His registration was up to date. Still, the uneasy feeling in his gut grew. He'd been here too many times before. The flashing red and blue lights erupted behind him, painting the inside of his car in strobing color. Marcus pulled over to the curb, exhaling slowly. He reached for his wallet, placed it on the dashboard, then rolled down his window and kept both hands visible on the wheel. Just last month, he had given his nephew this speech. Always keep your hands where they can see them. Be polite. Don't make sudden moves. Now he reminded himself. The two officers approached, their silhouettes sharp against the setting sun. The lead cop, a burly man with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, swaggered up to the driver's side. His partner, who was younger and had more muscle, stood back with one hand on his holstered sidearm. License and registration. The lead cop barked, not bothering with a greeting. Marcus nodded, his voice calm. Officer, my license is in my wallet on the dashboard. My registration is in the glove compartment. Permit me to reach for them? The officer's lips curled into a smirk. Just do it. Slowly. Marcus complied, moving with deliberate care. As the officer looked at the documents, he handed over his registration and license. What brings you to this neighborhood? The cop asked, his tone accusatory. I live here, Marcus replied evenly. Is there a problem? The cop ignored the question, glancing at his partner. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus was hesitant. Officer, can you tell me why I'm being stopped? The cop's jaw tightened. Step out of the vehicle. Now! Marcus stepped out with his hands visible, unbuckling his seatbelt. The younger cop moved in, circling behind him. Turn around. Hands on the hood. Marcus gave in and felt the rough metal in his hands. He heard the snap of latex gloves, the rustle of fabric as the officers patted him down. You got any weapons on you? The lead cop demanded. No, sir, Marcus replied, though he knew his service weapon was locked in the glove box. What's in the vehicle? Just some groceries and my work bag. The cop snorted. What kind of work is it? Marcus hesitated, weighing his options. He'd learned that flashing his badge too soon could escalate things, make them think he was trying to pull rank. But the situation was already tense. I'm a federal law enforcement officer, he said quietly. The cop laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Yeah, right. And I'm the mayor. You got any proof of that? My credentials are in my bag in the back seat. The cop exchanged a look with his partner, then nodded. Stay here. Don't move. The younger cop moved to the passenger side, opening the door and rummaging through Marcus's belongings. Marcus stood still, heart pounding. His training had prepared him for high-stress situations, but it was different when you were the one who was hurt. He thought of his nephew, of all the young black men who never made it home from routine traffic stops. The lead cop circled him, eyes narrowed. You got smart mouth, you know that? Think you're better than us. Marcus shook his head. No, sir. I just want to get home. The cop stepped closer, his breath hot and sour. People like You always got an attitude. Always think the rules don't apply. Marcus bit back a retort. He knew how quickly things could spiral. The younger cop returned, holding Marcus's badge and credentials. He glanced at them, then at Marcus, his expression shifting from suspicion to confusion. Sarge, you might want to look at this. The lead cop snatched the badge, his eyes scanning the ID. For a moment, the street was silent except for the distant hum of traffic. The cop's face darkened. You think this is funny? Carrying a fake badge. Marcus met his gaze, steady and unflinching. That's a real badge. I'm a U.S. Marshal. The cop's jaw worked, his knuckles white around the badge. The younger officer shifted uneasily, glancing at his partner. Sarge, it looks legit. The lead cop glared at Marcus, then at his partner. Call it in. The younger cop retreated to the cruiser, radioing in Marcus's credentials. The lead cop stood over Marcus, his posture aggressive. You think you can just flash a badge and get out of anything? That's not how it works. Marcus said nothing, his patience wearing thin. Cops who couldn't stand the idea of a black man holding authority and saw every badge as a challenge to their own had been like this before. He remembered. The radio crackled, the dispatcher's voice confirming Marcus's identity and position. The younger cop returned, his face pale. He's legit, Sarge. He's a marshal. The lead cop's face twisted, a mix of anger and embarrassment. He tossed Marcus's badge back at him. You can go. Marcus caught the badge, his hand steady. Am I free to leave? The cop didn't answer, turning away. Marcus got back in his car, his heart still racing. As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the two officers argue on the sidewalk. He knew this wasn't over. Not for him, not for anyone who looked like him, but for tonight, at least, he was going home. As Marcus drove away from the curb, the city's familiar streets seemed suddenly foreign. Every shadow a reminder of how quickly things could have gone wrong. His hands trembled as he turned the steering wheel as the adrenaline continued to flow through his veins. He forced himself to focus on the road and the rhythm of the city, which had always been both home and battleground. By taking a deep breath, the encounter replayed in his mind. Every word, every gesture, the way the lead cop's eyes had narrowed with suspicion and something uglier. Marcus had been trained to handle high-pressure situations, to keep his cool when others lost theirs, but nothing in the academy had prepared him for quiet, insidious violence of being doubted, of being seen as a threat in his own neighborhood. When he first pinned the badge to his chest, it had symbolized authority and service, and he thought of it often. He remembered the pride in his mother's eyes, the way his father had clapped him on the back and said, "You're making a difference, son." However, as a reminder that no amount of accomplishment could shield him from the reality of his skin, the badge felt heavy, almost burdensome, tonight. He pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, the engine idling as he sat in the dark, letting the events of the evening settle. He considered calling his supervisor, reporting the incident, but he knew how these things went. There would be paperwork and perhaps a half-hearted investigation, but nothing would alter the situation in the end. The officers would only receive a warning or two. He'd seen it too many times before. Instead, he reached for his phone and dialed his sister, needing to hear a familiar voice. "Hey, Marcus," she answered, her tone warm and teasing. "You on your way to the barbecue tomorrow, or you going to bail on us again?" He tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. "Yeah, I'll be there. Just had a rough night." She heard the strain in his voice, her tone shifting. What took place? He hesitated because he didn't want to bother her, but the words came out anyway. The stop, the search, and the officer's surprise when they saw his badge. Her rage simmered beneath the surface as she listened in silence. "You did everything right," she said finally. "You made it safely home. That's what matters." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah, I know." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the quiet, the weight of the evening pressing down on him. He thought of all the times he'd been stopped before, the times he'd been followed in stores, the times he'd been called boy by men half his age. He thought of the young men he'd mentored, the ones who looked up to him, who believed that hard work and integrity could change the world. He wondered what he would tell them now. The next morning, Marcus woke early, the events of the previous night still fresh in his mind. He went for a run, pounding the city's cracked sidewalks, letting the rhythm of his feet and the rush of air clear his head. He passed the corner where he'd been stopped, the memory sharp and vivid. He questioned whether the officers were present, whether they remembered him, or whether he was just another name in a long line of suspicious black men. After his run, he showered and dressed, pinning his badge to his belt with a sense of defiance. He would not be made small, would not let fear dictate his life. At the barbecue, his family welcomed him with open arms, the smell of grilled meat and laughter filling the air. Jamal, his nephew, ran up to him with wide-eyed excitement. "Uncle Marcus, did you really arrest a bank robber last week?" Marcus smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Something like that." He watched his family, their joy and resilience, and felt a surge of pride. They had survived so much, endured so many indignities, and still they laughed, still they loved. Marcus and his sister sat on the porch later, watching Jamal chase fireflies in the yard as the sun set and the city lights shone on. "You ever get tired?" she asked quietly. "Of fighting, of proving yourself?" He considered the question, the answer as complex as the city itself. "Every day," he admitted. "But I can't stop, not when there's so much at stake." She nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Just promise me you'll be careful." He squeezed her hand, the unspoken words hanging between them. He would be careful, but he would not be silent. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus thought about the officers, about the system that had shaped them, about the city that was both home and battlefield. He knew that change would not come easily, that it would require courage and persistence and hope. But he also knew that he was not alone, that there were others like him, men and women who refused to be defined by fear, who carried their badges and their dignity with pride. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus made a silent promise to himself and to those who came after. He would keep fighting, keep pushing for justice, no matter how heavy the burden. The city was his, too, and he would not be driven from it. The following week, Marcus found himself summoned to the U.S. Marshal's district office, a nondescript building tucked between a bail bondsman and a shuttered diner. His supervisor called in the early hours of Monday, his voice clipped and formal, saying, "Hayes, I need you in my office at 9. Bring your report of the incident." Marcus had spent the weekend debating whether to file the report at all, but in the end, he decided that silence was complicity. He had written it carefully and measuredly, sticking to the facts and refusing to let his anger or frustration color his words. He felt the familiar tension coil in his stomach as he sat in the waiting area with the report in his lap. The office was busy, agents coming and going, the low hum of conversation punctuated by the occasional ring of the phone. When his supervisor, Chief Deputy Marshal Linda Torres, finally called him in, Marcus squared his shoulders and entered her office. Torres was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She gestured for him to sit, then took the report from his hands, scanning it quickly. "You did the right thing, Hayes," she said finally, her tone softer than he expected. "But you know how things work out. Internal Affairs will want a statement. The city PD's already been notified." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "I comprehend." Torres leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You want to press this?" He hesitated as he considered his family and the dangers. "I want accountability," he said quietly. "Not only for me, but for everyone else who has gone through this as well." Torres nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good, because this department stands behind you. But be prepared, there's going to be pushback." Over the next few days, Marcus was interviewed by Internal Affairs, his every word dissected and scrutinized. The city police department launched its own investigation, the officers involved placed on administrative leave. The story leaked to the press, and soon Marcus's phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, activists, and colleagues. Some offered support, others skepticism. When racial and policing issues came up, the city was divided, as it always has been. The story took on a life of its own on social media. Some hailed Marcus as a hero, a symbol of resilience and integrity. Others accused him of playing the race card, of trying to undermine the police. The lead officer, Sergeant Donnelly, became a lightning rod for controversy, his record scrutinized, his past stops and arrests dragged into the public eye. The department issued a statement promising a thorough and impartial investigation, but few believed it would lead to real change. Marcus tried to keep his head down, focusing on his work, but the pressure was relentless. He received hate mail, threats, and even a few veiled warnings from within his own agency. "You're making waves, Hayes," one colleague muttered in the break room. Not everyone likes that. But there were moments of solidarity, too. Quiet nods from fellow marshals, a supportive email from a judge he'd worked with, a handwritten note from a retired officer who'd faced similar struggles. Through it all, Marcus remained resolute. He spoke openly about his experience at community meetings and encouraged others to share their own experiences. He met with local activists, clergy, and city officials, pushing for reforms, body cameras, bias training, civilian oversight. The work was exhausting, the resistance fierce, but Marcus refused to back down. One evening, as he left a meeting at City Hall, he found Sergeant Donnelly waiting for him in the parking lot. The older man's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was drawn. "You had to make this public, didn't you?" Donnelly spat, his voice low and bitter. "You couldn't just let it go." Marcus stood his ground, his voice calm. "You abused your position. You treated me like a criminal because of the color of my skin. That is something I cannot simply let go." Donnelly's fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're better than me? You believe that your badge distinguishes you?" Marcus gave a head shake. "No. But it means I have a responsibility to the law, to the people I serve. That includes holding other officers accountable." For a moment, Donnelly looked as if he might lash out, but then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "You don't know what it's like," he muttered. "Every day, out there, you start seeing threats everywhere. You start forgetting people are just people." Marcus's anger softened, replaced by a weary sadness. "That's exactly why we need change. So we don't forget." Donnelly turned away, his silhouette stark against the city lights. "Good luck, Marshal. You're going to need it." As Marcus watched him go, he felt a strange mix of pity and resolve. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, that the forces arrayed against him were powerful and entrenched. But he also knew that he was not alone, that there were others, inside and outside the system, who shared his vision of justice. In the weeks that followed, the investigation dragged on, the city's attention shifting to other scandals, other crises. But Marcus kept pushing, kept speaking out, refusing to let the story fade into obscurity. He met with the mayor, the police chief, the city council, demanding concrete action. Some listened, others dismissed him, but he refused to be silenced. Through it all, he drew strength from his family, his community, and the knowledge that he was fighting for something larger than himself. The city was changing, slowly, painfully, but changing nonetheless. And Marcus was determined to be part of that change, no matter the cost. Months passed, and the city's season shifted from the sticky heat of summer to the crisp chill of autumn, the trees lining Marcus's street shedding their leaves in a riot of gold and red. The investigation into the traffic stop had become a touchstone in the city's ongoing debate about race, policing, and accountability. News outlets ran op-eds and interviews. Community groups organized rallies, and the police department, under mounting public pressure, announced a series of reforms: mandatory body cameras for all officers, expanded anti-bias training, and the creation of a civilian review board with real oversight powers. Marcus watched these developments with cautious optimism, knowing that policy changes were only the first step in a much longer journey. The officers involved in his stop faced disciplinary hearings, and while the younger cop received suspension and mandatory retraining, Sergeant Donnelly was demoted and reassigned to desk duty. The punishments felt inadequate to some, too harsh to others, but to Marcus, they were at least an acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong. He knew that true justice was more than a matter of individual consequences. It was about changing the culture that allowed such abuses to happen in the first place.